all things business planning during COVID-19. So how businesses have been impacted, how short-term goals have changed, how businesses have pivoted, opportunities that have been taken advantage of, challenges. So we've got a really exciting panel today with a range of different perspectives. So if we just move to the next slide and introduce our panel. So we have Dean Breyley from EOS Worldwide, Andrea Livesey from Street Games, and Andy Johnson from London School Online. So as I said, it's a panel discussion today, but if anyone in the audience has any questions of their own, please do put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer as many as we can. As I said as well, we really want you to get some actionable insight from this. So if you do have any aha moments, please share them in the chat because we'd love to hear about them. Okay, so without further ado, can I just hand over to our panelists for a quick introduction, and we'll stop sharing the screen so we can see them up close and personal. So Dean, do you mind starting us off?
Yeah, hi Hannah, thanks and great to be here. My name is Dean Breyley. Wear a couple of hats. One of the hats is community leader for EOS in Europe. For those not familiar with EOS, EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. What we do is help privately run entrepreneurial businesses to run their business simply, more efficiently, more effectively, with less dysfunction, and help them get what they want from their businesses. And then my other hat is I run around the UK when we're not in lockdown, helping teams to do the very same thing. So working with the leadership teams of those companies to help them deliver their vision.
Perfect. Andy?
Yeah, hi, my name's Andy Johnson. I'm the director of London School Online, which, as the name suggests, is an online training business. We specialise in languages and communication, and we're part of a bigger group which specialises in face-to-face training. So I'm kind of in a unique position in the sense that although my part of the business hasn't really changed very much, the larger part of the business certainly has. We've had to pivot quite a lot of that face-to-face training and move it all online.
Great, looking forward to hearing a bit more about that. Andrea?
Yeah, so my name's Andrea Livesey. I'm the head of workforce operations at Street Games. Street Games is one of the UK's leading sport development charities. Our mission is to use sport to change the lives of disadvantaged young people and communities. We have organisations all over the country that are working, and we support them in terms of fundraising, campaigns, training, research programmes, etc., etc. My main focus is on what we call the Training Academy. So we train to develop the workforce to activate skills and knowledge in the community. We reach over 5,000 learners a year through a mixture of short skills, based workshops and accredited qualifications, and even apprenticeships. In the last 3 to 4 years, we've also expanded to offering a commercial delivery as well.
Great, thank you. Before we start, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today, because I know there's a lot of uncertainty in the world at the moment. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of scary things going on, and it's great that you guys are willing to share with the training industry what's going on in your worlds. So it's fantastic that you're joining us today. Thank you very much. So I'll start with quite a general question before we get into the detail. How has your business been impacted by COVID-19?
I'll quite happily kick us off. So we were and will continue to be, when we move on, a face-to-face, in-person, like say leadership training, right? We work with the chemistry in the room, with the people, and there is something that a layer of technology just adds in terms of complexity to that. So we've had to to use one of the most cliches word of the time, pivot and come and be able to present all of the material that we do online, providing the same value in a very different format. So it makes facilitation a lot more challenging. The teaching side of stuff, the technology has actually really aided us, because we can do a lot of things with technology that you can't necessarily do in the real live world. So it's been a blessing and a curse at the same time, and big shift for us, massive big shift. Definitely.
Making it up as you go along a little bit. That's how I think a lot of people feel.
Yeah, you have to, experiential learning, right? Sometimes you've got to skin your knees and then learn it through. So, technology's certainly done that for me. you know, a couple of times in the last few months.
Yeah, we won't get into the horror stories. Andy?
Well, yeah, I mean, aside from this is all about what you can control, and my part of the business hasn't really changed, but across our training centres in the UK in March, we had around about 300 students who were doing courses with us. And we only teach adults, and they're quite intensive courses. They tend to be anything from 2 to 26 weeks. And they tend to vary between around about 15 to 30 hours intensive instruction on a weekly basis. And we've got 3 training centres, and of course they all close their doors. So the first thing we had to do was to complete those courses. So we did a mix of, as most of our client base, all of our client base comes from Europe mainly and the rest of the world. We have very few local people coming through the doors. So already in the weeks leading up to the lockdown, we had people who were worried, they were cancelling courses, they were leaving their courses early. So we were kind of in a position where we were doing hybrid courses with some students in the room, other students dialing in and doing the instruction that way. And then we had to complete a number of enrolments using virtual groups. And then of course, once you get through your initial cohort, you then have, well, what do we do next? And then we had to quickly alter our complete course structure so that instead of having 30 hours of intensive instruction, instead of just shifting all of that online, we had to be creative, because, you know, it's that idea of just mirroring what happens in a face-to-face classroom. It doesn't really work when you move it all online. So it's been a challenge. It's been very fluid. We're kind of anticipating that this is going to be our normal for the rest of the year, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of reliance on your side of the business and your skill sets.
Yeah, I had a full head of hair at the beginning of March.
Oh, brilliant. And Andrea, obviously sports, a lot of that is physical, face-to-face. How has your business been impacted?
Yeah, so Street Games staff ourselves can work remotely, so that's generally okay, but the training that we offer has always been face-to-face, and so all that had to be cancelled or postponed. Whilst most of our funders have been quite understanding, we have lost our commercial revenue, so we are having to consider like the budget quite carefully. In terms of our community organisations that we support, they've not been able to deliver their activities or programmes either, but we've been able to use some of our connections and partners to help them, like support them in different ways. So for example, we've had donations of rugby balls and tennis rackets and things that we've been able to give to the projects to then distribute out to the young people so that they can still stay active at home. And then we've taken to using things like social media to then offer them activity ideas and games for how they can use that kit.
Perfect. So from a practical perspective, what planning tools have people been using to kind of reassess this new world?
Anybody want to take that? Oh.
Dean's got an idea.
I'm sure Dean's got a few ideas.
So yeah, in terms of planning tools, you know, for us, we usually work with good old paper and pen, because there's a lot of psychology around actually getting people to write stuff out. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has been kind of translated into the digital world. So using tools like Mural, I think Miro, you know, some of these names have kind of not quite stuck yet. And it's really just trying to look at the technology decks that's available for doing the stuff we would normally do face-to-face, in person with a pen in your hand, and still, you know, writing on a whiteboard on Zoom doesn't have quite the same impact as it does when you're live and in session. You know, it looks like my 3-year-old's been scrolling all over it. So it's just been really trying to get to grips with the technology and how we can provide the same experience in a completely different environment. So yeah, the tools that we use are the same. The manner in which we deliver them has had to shift. And like I said, there's definitely been some benefits of doing that, and you know, the technology does add a layer of you know, dynamics, I suppose, that it's hard to do when you've just got a flip chart and a marker in your hand, right? You can get pretty creative with technology. So it's just learning how to use it, and like I say, becoming an expert in a software platform very quickly because of need rather than desire.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any frameworks that you'd suggest? Obviously, we've been through the EOS process, so we're in a privileged position. We know what those offline tools look like. It would be great if there is anything that you could share.
Absolutely. So, you know, like for us, it's a model, modeling what great companies do to deliver success time and time and time again. So, you know, EOS is exactly one of those frameworks, whether that's for planning, whether that's for getting clarity around vision, whether it's for understanding the drivers of cash flow into the business, right? It's just having a model or a tool to be able to do that. And, you know, for the last 20 years, EOS have been working out how do we solve the majority of a company's problems with the fewest amount of tools. So, you know, like EOS has a 20 toolkit, 20 set of tools that solve 80% of a business's problems. And in the digital world, like I say, it's easy to get a team together, whether you're globally distributed or, you know, just a couple of houses away from each other, to really work through that framework and through those tools.
Yeah, we actually had our quarterly planning day. I think it was the 17th of March. It was the Friday just before everything kicked off. So it was valuable planning time. So when we came to sort of planning the goals for the quarter, they were all kind of tied into what we couldn't really anticipate exactly what was going to happen, but we were aware of the changes that were coming. So I think that helped us get a little bit ahead of the curve, if you like, in that sense.
Definitely. I guess that's jumping down a little bit in terms of planning for the quarter, because the timing of all this was right at the beginning of Q2, and one of the things we did was cut our 3-month goals down to 1 month, because we weren't sure what that whole 3-month period looks like. Has anyone else adapted their quarterly planning?
I'd say we're probably on weekly planning at the moment.
Yeah.
I would like to say, so in actual fact, we were just coming into quarter one. Our planning goes with financial year, so all the planning that we had done almost went out the window, and it became okay, fresh sheet, start again. But it's almost become a fortnightly plan now. So we're putting in regular reviews to try and with the changing situation in terms of both the restrictions and also the information that we're receiving, it needs to be regular.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing with the teams, right? Because all of the teams that I work with are being impacted in a very different way. And it is just that meeting rhythm. It's having the right meeting rhythm for you. So whether that's for you personally with your direct reports, for your whole department, for like leadership teams as well, it's establishing what that looks like. And in a normal world, we would have this 90-day big kind of strategic pulse, and inside of that a weekly tactical pulse. And then any one-on-one time is necessary. And we're just seeing it shorten. Something I'm hearing a lot at the moment is this talk of horizons, and how far out can you actually see to plan? And the horizon has drastically lowered, right? So everybody is now looking at the end of their nose going, that is just about as far ahead as I can control. So that's as far out as we're going to plan. Everything else past that is a hope, a dream, and a wish. So it really is, like Andy said earlier on, is figuring out what can you control and for how long do we think we can control it, and planning in that rhythm. So, whereas, in the main, most of my teams are still working on a weekly cycle as a leadership team, and then it's just more one-on-one time. But I do have some teams that they're meeting on those kind of micro pulses daily. So whereas they would have a weekly scorecard, we've got, some teams now, they have a daily scorecard, and for them, it's not about winning the week, it's about winning the day, right? Let's just make sure today is a successful day, and we'll worry about tomorrow when we get there.
Wow, that's intense. Daily scorecard.
Pretty intense, right?
Yeah, so let's talk scorecards and metrics. Are we seeing people add new metrics with the new, obviously what success looks like previously is very different. What are your guys' experiences with that? Yeah,
anybody want to take that? Or I'll happily, yes, activity-based numbers are now more crucial than ever. We had a lot of teams that in times of comfort, when things are okay, their scorecards were a bit of a vanity tool, and it was just nice to see how great we're doing. But, the premise of the tool that we teach in a weekly scorecard is activity-based numbers. What are we doing within that week that is going to generate success in the future? Because that's the thing you can control, right? Like, we talk about the difference between leading indicators and lagging indicators, and you have a 0% chance of improving the past. So they're numbers that you can do nothing about. But this level of activity on a weekly, even daily basis, as we're talking about now, that's just understanding what do we need to do. And if it's about collecting cash, if it's about generating revenue from existing clients, or actually still in this kind of biz dev world, because people do still need to bring in new business. It's just about really understanding what can we do, how much of that activity do we need to do, and what is the best measurable in place for making sure we get what we expect.
Definitely.
We're in a unique position because ultimately we are a charity and we have one mission, but we've effectively just like the commercial has taken a back seat, and we're all about supporting our community organisations. Everything that we do is about insight led and talking to people to find out information. So the first thing that kind of we did as our tool was to go out and talk to people, find out as much information about what they're experiencing, what they're struggling with, what the challenges are, what they want to do. And then we almost we've built like a response framework which has 6 areas of work in it. You might call it almost a soft restructure, really. So everybody in the organisation has been placed within this framework. So we're not working in our usual teams. We're working for one goal. So the framework has, for each area, it has an objective, it has activities, it has a team, and it has a lead. So everyone's really clear on exactly what we're doing at the minute.
I think for us, it's we've had to scale back certain parts of the operation. For example, we have a restaurant in one of our training centres, and obviously that's not needed. Neither are our front of house staff. So we've had to use the furlough scheme quite extensively because there are simply jobs that we don't have a need for at the moment. And then what we've done is we've had to ramp up the training in other aspects as well. So obviously the online side of things is much heavier, much busier than it was. I think for us, the planning at the moment is based on the best advice we're receiving. We're told that we may be able to open our doors as soon as July. I think that's unlikely. And even if we do open our doors, we're reliant on people coming from overseas. So we've got this 2-week quarantine period. As I mentioned, our average course stay at the moment is 2 weeks. So for us, it's planning for a future without the core market and the core kind of people coming through the doors. And it's tough, but at least we know what our baseline is, and at least we have the systems in place to know what kind of numbers we need in order to make a scale back operation profitable and to make it survive.
Definitely. So talking about kind of going back to normal, we had a session yesterday where we were talking about using the things we've innovated in the new online delivery methods when we're back to business as usual, and that's been an opportunity to develop new things that we might not necessarily have prioritised or had the time to do previously. Is there any examples of that within your businesses?
Well, for us, massively, yeah. I think one of the challenges. Sorry, Andrew. I think one of the challenges is with online training. It's judged in deficit at the moment, and by that I mean it's judged on the basis that it's constantly being compared to what we used to have, with face to face. And so, kind of getting back to what Dean was saying, you can't replicate what happens in the room. I think that's true, but I think we ought to be careful about making that comparison. Similarly, people are complaining that Zoom is unstable. Well, Zoom was never designed to have this many people using it, so it's kind of being judged in very, very extreme circumstances. But I think we're beginning to see positives in our online model. So, for example, for us, because we do a lot of foreign languages, we have learners who, for English is not a first language. What we're seeing is that one of the advantages of online is it's a great leveler. You've got 5 faces here, all similar size. No one can shrink into the background. And you don't tend to have one person that dominates a meeting so much either when you have online tuition. So that's a positive. And the other thing as well is I think we're seeing greater engagement levels, and I'd be really interested to know what the audience thinks about this, whether you're seeing more engagement with your training programs. I think it's a fallacy that face-to-face somehow drives better engagement, because I mean, I've been on face-to-face training courses where I've been bored to tears, but when the trainer looks at me, I'll light up and pretend that I'm interested. I think that, you know, I think we need to start looking at the advantages that this model brings, because I think for many of us, and as I mentioned, it's going to be the reality for some time yet.
Exactly. Sorry, Dean, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, you know, Andy's absolutely bang on there. Before, because we were pretty maniacal about getting people in a room, right? And like you say, because that was the world we were living in, that was the environment. So considering virtual sessions for us just wasn't something we were looking at. So I had conversations with globally distributed leadership teams, and we were like, you know, get you together once every 90 days, fly people in from all locations. This has really forced us to relook at that and say, well, yeah, it's a different experience, and some things you're going to benefit from, some things are going to be different in a way that, you know, everybody gets this sense of loss when you have change in some way, shape or form, right? So, but it is about getting over that, getting past that, establishing some sense of this is normality for now, until again, things change again. So it's that constantly moving forward. And if this is where we are, how can we make the best of what we've got now? So yeah, I'm on the same page as Andy there.
It's this idea of practice mirroring, the idea that what we try to just reproduce what we were doing online, but I think that's counterintuitive in the long run. And I think we need to, I mean, one of the things that we're working on at the moment is how we, I don't know if anyone is listening from universities, but often a learning experience is measured in contact hours. And I mentioned before that, you know, we have 15-hour or 30-hour courses. And so the big scramble was, how can we reproduce those 15 contact hours online? And I think the answer is you don't. But there are other ways that you can get that human connection. You can get that, I guess it's called presence, if nothing else. It's the idea that you can respond to questions quickly. It doesn't have to be in a setting like this. You know, it could be instant feedback. It could be moderating discussion forums and trying to generate the engagement in other ways, because I think it's exhausting for learners to be online for 15 hours a week or 30 hours a week.
Just on the kind of engagement levels, I think we've had a little bit of a mixed experience, to be honest. So we have one group that have really embraced it, and you know, we've got pretty much like 100% attendance online. They're loving it. But then we are experiencing some people that have this, like the media seems to have turned it kind of digital poverty, where, you know, maybe they only have one device, or they're having to share devices with other people in the family, or they don't simply have a quiet space where they can come to away from the rest of the family to be able to kind of concentrate on what we're saying. So we've kind of had a bit of a mixed bag with that.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear on the panel discussion yesterday. We had Emily from UCAS, and from their virtual delivery model, they said that their net promoter score has never been higher. So it's interesting the different ways that people take to it, definitely. So in terms of, I guess that's a lot of positives, what's the number one challenge, I guess, that you've seen and how you've overcome it?
Fewer numbers, simple as that. Fewer people coming, fewer people taking our courses, and we can certainly make up some of that, but we haven't been able to make up all of it.
From my side, I think it's the reliance on the technology. You know, just having a stable broadband connection. And you know, like when I first started, I was running off my MacBook, and my MacBook should be a great bit of kit. It was freezing every couple of hours. Just didn't seem to like being on Zoom for numerous hours at a time. And that makes it really hard when you try and deliver, you know, great value to clients, and all of a sudden now the technology is in the way, which you have a limited control over, right? Like when the broadband drops out, I'm like, what do I do? How do I get around that? You know, I was at one point on a hotspot on my phone, just trying to use my phone signal as a reliable way of waiting for my broadband to restabilize. And, you know, that just adds a distraction and a complexity into the environment that, you know, like you say, just takes you away from delivering 100% of your focus onto the team. So there's a way around it. You know, I've ordered a new broadband connection. I've got better tech, so you can counter it. That gets expensive and timely, but it's just something else to throw into the mix. That's what I would say has been the biggest challenge for me.
For us, it's probably been that process of taking what was pretty much 100% face-to-face delivery online. You know, we've dabbled in it in the past, but we've never really given it a priority. We had contracts that, you know, funded contracts that we had to work out how we were going to complete the delivery for. Like the process that we've been through in terms of the tutors, not just thinking, okay, so how am I going to deliver this online, but what are the, you know, what's the delivery style I'm going to use? How am I going to make it engaging? How am I going to safeguard my participants? Dean was just saying there about technology dropping out. So if somebody suddenly disappears off your screen and you talk about, you know, I don't know, mental health or something, have they disappeared because it's a technology issue, or have they disappeared because they're upset? And how do you ensure that they're okay from a distance? So all of those things have been things that we've had to kind of get our heads around pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can second that. You know, Andrea, we had a session the other day with the team, and the team were in some financial hardships, and so they were talking about scaling back people. And one of the members of the leadership team was going to temporarily, if not permanently, lose her role on the leadership team. And, you know, it was quite an emotional thing to take when you're discussing that live on a Zoom room. And as a facilitator, I'm 100 miles away behind a tech wall. And how do I really help to coach and facilitate out of that scenario so the team come out of that for the better? Because, you know, she turned the camera off and all of a sudden I've lost, you know, and I can't reach through the screen and help as much as I could do in the physical world. So I guess with experience, you'll learn how to get over that. And that is something that's going to take time, but that is another complexity. Yeah. You're not just there. You can't just reach out and hug someone or help them.
I think, yeah, I completely see how that would have been a very tricky situation. I think it would have been equally tricky in a face-to-face situation as well, because for that poor person, there's nowhere to hide.
No.
I think one of the good things about online is that you do have sort of the back channels where you can contact them privately on text or privately on message and just check that everything's okay. So I'm not going to evangelize over online all day, but there are. I'm just going back to the advantages again, but again, a very tricky situation. You're right.
Yeah. I think the other thing is like, so getting the trainers and the tutors to spend time to learn the tech themselves, so that when then their participants have struggled or disappeared, they understand why that might be, and they've got suggestions for how to improve. You know, we ordered our Zoom account pretty much instantly, and the first week was literally just spent, okay, let's do everything on Zoom just while we learn it. Let's try putting people in breakout rooms, try the whiteboard, how do you save a whiteboard, things like that. We've spent a lot of time, you know, just playing with it ourselves in order to kind of understand how it works.
I think we found that a lot of our learners were far more tech savvy than we were, or a lot of the trainers. And they were very supportive. And I think, you know, a piece of training that we did before we started all of this was just to be very clear on what happens if something goes wrong. If there's a dropout of audio, if there's a dropout of image, if the call crashes, this is how you start it again. And just thinking about what you were saying earlier, Dean, about the technological difficulties and issues. I remember, Matt, we did a thing back in March, and I seem to remember the quality of the call then is far worse than it is now. Things seem to have stabilized a little bit. But yeah, so I think the audience tend to be much more forgiving than perhaps we would give them credit for.
Just an interesting point, like to just ask what people think, really. So like our usual style of delivery would be maybe 3 hours, maybe a full day, whereas some of the webinars and things that we've offered are maybe 1 hour. I'm just wondering, like, we've seen that some people maybe they don't necessarily value the 1 hour webinar as much as the 3 hours face to face. So for example, when they're booking on, they're saying, why do I have to go through all the booking process? It's just an hour, things like that. So just interested to know if anyone else has experienced anything like that. Oh, silent.
No, I have had value conversations with clients because they're like, you know, there's no expense, right? Like, and I'm like, what? But you're not paying for the expenses. It's for the value we deliver in the training. you know, we're still going to get you the same results. It's just in a different environment. So it's just a positioning piece, isn't it? But I can appreciate that. Yeah.
I think without fully knowing your context, I mean, it depends how rigorous your sign-up procedure is. If for 1 hour, I can see perhaps where they're coming from. We tend to do, for webinars, they tend to be between 2 and 3 hours, probably with, or usually with, some kind of pre or post course task as well. So they're a little bit meatier, if you like.
That was a very hot topic on our webinar session a few weeks ago, wasn't it, Andy? 6 to 8 weeks ago when this first started, was how do you value something that was face-to-face for a full day is now just 2 hours, 3 hours, similar principle. And very hot topic of debate, wasn't it?
It's something I've been asked a lot over the last few weeks. You know, how do you price it? How do you price your online training compared to your face-to-face? And it's like, well, you're still providing the same service. You're still providing the same level of expertise. If anything, you're making it more convenient for people. Certainly in our case, there's no travel required, but on the same sense, for us, a large part of our courses are the fact that they're immersion. You get the whole cultural aspect of being in London and, you know, doing that kind of thing. So there's certain things that you certainly won't get on an online course that you will on a face-to-face, but I think you need to stand reasonably firm on what your value, or how you value and how you price those courses, because essentially you're still providing the same service.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's value and it's the same resource requirement, same skill set, same. It's important to stand firm on that, I'd say. And it is a popular hot topic that everyone asks about. So it's good we covered that. So Dean, oh, sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw a comment about breaks. Someone saying that 1.5 hours works well, 3 hours you need a break. And to clarify, yeah, when we do the 3 hour sessions, there's definitely breaks built in. You definitely need time. And we actually suggest that participants stand up and move around and actually make sure they physically move, because that lack of physical movement, I've got no steps on my Fitbit anymore, because I just sit up here in the spare room all day.
That was one of the first things I did, was get a stand-up desk when this was, because there was no way I was going to deliver 7-8 hours of virtual training on my bum. It was not going to happen. So, yeah.
Are you standing up now, Dean?
I am, mate. Yeah, I'm free to roam around.
Brilliant. So, Dean, we're getting a few comments about your book collection.
It is the strategic book collection, right? Not read any of them.
No. So what I wanted to ask was, you mentioned a few of the EOS tools, so Scorecards, Weekly Meeting Pulse. I'm just wondering if you could share just a few more practical tools that maybe people can take away.
Yeah, so I was thinking about, what are the important ones right now? There's actually one of the tools in our toolbox that gets overlooked most often by most teams that's really important right now, which is one called a clarity break. And, I would ask you, Andy, I would ask you, Hannah, were you taking your clarity breaks? So this is just about taking time for you to actually stop and just think, because everybody is so busy right now and there's so much demand on everyone's time. Everybody isn't necessarily being as resourceful as they possibly could be if they just took a moment to stop, reflect, think, and plan. And it feels like the last thing you should do right now is actually take time to slow down, but you get so much more value from having a structured think, right, about what is the best, most effective thing I could be doing with my time right now, or what is the one thing that I can do to make a difference for the business. But that only comes when you give yourself space and time to think. It doesn't happen when you're busy. So, take a clarity break, half an hour, quarter of an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever, just to sit down and think. Henry Ford, thinking is such hard work, which is why so few people engage in it. So, for us, it's about this meeting pulse, having a regular, consistent meeting pulse with a structured agenda, so it isn't just an ad hoc meeting whereby you don't actually get anything productive done. It's about making sure there are some measurables in there to report on, making sure you're solving the most important kind of issues that are facing you right now as a team. Weekly activity scorecards, absolutely. And, cash flow drivers, really understanding how is money flowing through the business right now. Because without that cash, it's hard for a business to survive. So, there's a whole host of tools. If you're looking for one, then you're going to challenge me there to find just one. But there's traction, right? That would be my first port of call. If you're wondering what to do right now, do a plug for Gino Wickman, right? I don't get any money from selling his book, but that would be the go-to. You know, there are tools in there. You can apply them to your business directly, and you know, they changed my life, and I've seen them change a lot of other lives as well, for the better.
I think taking, I was going to say, I think the idea of taking any kind of clarity break is really important at the moment, because for me, working from home was an opportunity to get some headspace, being out of the office. And now, you know, with 2 kids running around downstairs and screaming, it's very difficult to find that space.
Yeah.
So going for lots of walks around the block at the moment, that always helps.
Yeah, we've been encouraging our staff to put in like we call it a breathing space, but it's the same idea. So at least an hour every day where, you know, you've not got any meetings, you've not got any specific work you're doing, you're just taking that time to go for a walk, get some fresh air, move about, do some yoga, and really clear the brain, really.
Definitely. I think if you're not looking after the team, how's the business going to look after itself? So
absolutely,
yeah. And team health, definitely. We're spending more time together, but is the health there? And I think that's an important thing to work on too.
Yeah.
Matt, do we have any questions? I don't want to be selfish with our panelists' time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got quite a few questions coming through on the Q&A. So just to kick off with, first of all, in terms of the business planning, one question that came through is, how far into the future do you think is safe to plan? Might be a bit of a range of topics there, might be unknown. And then also, how do you determine how far do you scale back? So how far do you think is safe to plan in the future? And then how have you determined how far you can scale back operations?
Again, it's so dependent on your context. All I can say for what we've done is we've scaled back everything we don't see a need for the next 3 to 6 months. And fortunately, we rely largely on freelance trainers. We do have a large number of permanent trainers as well, but we've been able to sort of turn one tap off and use our permanent trainers much more thoroughly than we did before. I think in terms of planning, we're almost running 2 separate plans here, maybe even 3. We're kind of looking for the situation, we're planning for the situation continuing for anything up to a year. And then we're also planning for opening our doors on a limited. I saw there was another question around social distancing when you do open your doors, because, you know, we're going from group sizes or rooms that can hold up to 12 participants. So I think we'd only be able to put 4 in there in terms of social distancing. So we're kind of modeling all the different kind of possible outcomes for opening our doors in September, opening them in January, opening them in next summer. You know, there's no one plan here. We've got plan A, B, C, D, E, and F at the moment.
And I would just touch on that. The scenario planning there is pretty crucial, right? So what we're seeing teams do is actually try and map out those, you know, what would our organization look like if we lost 50% of our revenue for the next year? What would it look like if we lost 75%? And then it's just creating a plan and a model around how you would execute that. So, you know, how many people would we need to do that? What would the operations look like? It's tough because nobody does know. So in terms of the planning, you know, one of the quotes that sticks with me is Mike Tyson, right? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face and then the plan goes out the window. So, you know, that's a crucial thing about the plan. The plan isn't concrete. The plan is just with the information you have today, what are you doing about tomorrow, right? So there's kind of the time frames there. We're still working with teams thinking in 10-year chunks, right? Because this short-term temporary, and however long temporary is going to be, shouldn't affect where they ultimately want to go. So it isn't about losing the disconnect with the short-term decision making now, sacrificing the long-term future, because we will eventually recover, we will eventually become stronger again, and you know, but it really comes down to that day to day. Most teams are struggling to care much about 3 years out. Most teams are struggling to plan for the rest of the year. So, you know, we're in this 90-day cycle at the moment. Let's just make it out to the next quarter. And then when we get there, we'll see if we got what we wanted. If we didn't get what we wanted, we will readapt, replan, and go again. So inside of that, you've then got this weekly pulse, and things are changing so drastically, you know, on such a short space of time. The plan is the plan until you have new information. And when you've got new information, replan, go again. And so it's just that mindset of being really agile and not getting too down or hard on yourself if the plans change.
And Andrew?
Yeah, so we've furloughed a few staff, but as a charity that already receives public money, there's actually a limit on the amount that we're allowed to furlough. So we've had to take a good look at our finances and what we predicted we would be getting in and not. And in actual fact, we voted unanimously to take a 10% pay cut across the whole staff, to ensure that there were no redundancies in the next year. In terms of planning, I completely agree with Dean. We're planning until the situation changes. But what we have noticed is there's a lot more bids and grants and loans that are now available for different things that we might not have thought of before. So we're looking at one at the minute, which would give us some money to develop some more digital or online learning. And so the planning we're doing is, okay, so when we're back to normal, how could the online be blended with the face-to-face? And we could make use of this to make it a better offer in the future, and kind of focusing on that, really.
And it's really interesting because I think so many organisations are just seeing the online side of this at the moment as an unnecessary evil, and as soon as things go back to normal, they'll drop it. And I think that's a wasted opportunity for many of us. I think there is real opportunity here to have something that runs in parallel or some kind of hybrid. I think the way learning is at the moment, it's changing rapidly, and with everything that was happening in the world with the climate crisis and perhaps the reluctance to travel great distances for things like this, I think that we probably will see a new model emerge at the end of all this. They say you should never waste a crisis. I think that's possibly true here.
I like that one. So have we got any more questions, Matt?
Yes, we've got some more training related questions, and I suppose, Dean, this will be applicable for your consultations as well. So what tips do you have moving face-to-face training online, and also how are you getting your face-to-face instructors up to speed with online presentations? So I suppose the top 3 tips I suppose would be useful, and also how are you getting instructors up to speed with online technology? And I think we'll kick off with Andy on this one, because we did a webinar on this one quite a while ago. There's a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah. Wow, that's going back a bit now. Top 3 tips on how to get your trainers ready for it. I think it's understanding. I think the first thing is to decide which platform you're going to use to deliver your training. It doesn't have to be Zoom. I think most people are using Zoom because it certainly works probably best for most people. Particularly, I mean, for us, one of our challenges was that, as I mentioned, a lot of our students were in country. They didn't have their laptops with them. They didn't have computers. They only had their phones with them. So we needed something that had a good mobile app, and Zoom was definitely the choice for us. So it's knowing what platform you're going to use, being familiar with it. And I think, Andre, you said that once you got your Zoom licenses, you just did everything on Zoom for a week. And I think that's the best way to learn. I've seen so many experts talking about how you can use Zoom and how you do this and that and the other, but the quickest way and the best way is to just get your hands dirty and do it yourself as best you can. That's the first thing. The second thing, as I was saying before, don't try to just reproduce what you were doing in the classroom or in the training centre. It's not necessarily the best way forward. Think about how you could rework some of the input. Think about how you can perhaps work on how you do your feedback sessions as well. A lot of this can be moved into an asynchronous environment. So you can reduce those number of contact hours, which essentially is just going to drain a lot of your participants. It's not easy. It's not easy. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of reworking. But I think those are the main bits of advice I would give.
Andrew?
Yep. So in terms of getting trainers up to speed, obviously I talked about kind of having that playtime on the system. The other thing that we've introduced is a regular kind of air and share for our tutors and trainers. So it's a time when they can come together, they can share experiences, discuss ideas and different ways of kind of delivering things. So that's what I'm saying that. In terms of top tips, so I think joining instructions are really important. Like we can't presume that people that are signing up to the training necessarily know how to use the tools that we have chosen to deliver through. So making sure that not only are your staff comfortable with using those tools, but your learners are as well. That's one kind of thing that we've picked up. These are quite personal, but there's nothing worse than joining like an online meeting or something, and you can see all these faces, you don't really know who they are, and you don't know what to say, and you're a bit like, oh, you just sit there and you're like, oh, people are looking at me because I've got my camera on. So one of the things that we've tried is like almost having that icebreaker activity that someone can be doing like during that waiting time while people are joining. So we've used tools like Mentimeter, where you ask a question, they type an answer in, and it creates like a word cloud on the screen, so there's actually something to look at and engage with.
I think icebreakers are really, really, really useful, and one of the great advantages of the fact that you're meeting people in their homes is you can use that as a resource. So I was on a training session a couple of weeks back where we took a 15-minute break, and before the break the instructor said, you know, I want you to imagine that we're all going to the moon tomorrow, and you can take one thing from your house with you, one item. I want you to go and get it and then bring it back. And then when we came back, we all showed that item. So, and it was a nice way of kind of seeing a little bit about the personalities of the people that were on the training course and allowing them to choose how they want to show themselves to you, if you like. And I thought that was a nice way of using people's homes. I mean, I've seen inside a lot of people's houses over the last few years.
I've seen a lot of virtual treasure hunts going on.
Yes.
You know, like just saying, go in your house, go and find a wooden spoon, go and some random stuff happening, and then, you know, then you've got the old, you know, this is happening now a lot, isn't it? Right? Everyone's got their own virtual backgrounds in place. This seems to be a thing.
Quite an important safety point there, though, because particularly if you're working with, you know, ex-offenders or young people at risk of offending, there's an awful lot of information that people can glean from the background of your camera. So actually, as a trainer, that's maybe something that people need to be considering in terms of, you know, what can people see and what information am I giving away?
Yeah.
Our best icebreaker so far has been go and get a pair of socks, roll them up, and start like doing activity in the room, like, and sharing those activities. That's always quite a fun one, because everyone starts commenting on whether the socks are odd or even, and what pattern and design they've got and things like that.
Oh, that's some great tips. So I'm sure we could talk all day, but we do have time scales, sorry guys. So Matt's going to introduce the session that's coming up next, but if you do have any takeaways, insights, any comments, please do put them in the chat, because we'd love to hear kind of what you got out of today's session. So thank you to our panelists, that was really, really useful.